Millionaire abandons pregnant German shepherd in the cold. What happens next will shock you. The tires crunched against the icy road before coming to a sudden stop. For a moment, everything was silent, too silent. Then, the car door swung open, and a shivering German shepherd was shoved out into the brutal cold. She barely had time to react before the door slammed shut. Her paws skidded on the frozen ground as she scrambled toward the car, desperate, confused. But before she could reach it, the tires spun, kicking up slush and snow, and the luxury SUV sped off into the night, leaving her behind. She stood there, stunned. She didn't move. She couldn't. Her warm breath formed desperate clouds in the freezing air. Her eyes, once filled with trust and love, now reflected heartbreak, betrayal, and fear. The cold bit into her skin, but that pain was nothing compared to the realization settling deep in her chest. She had been abandoned. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't an accident. Someone she loved had left her here to die. The wind roared through the desolate landscape, whipping up flurries of snow. The temperature was dropping fast, too fast. The German shepherd took a hesitant step forward, her heavy belly slowing her down. She was pregnant, exhausted, and had nowhere to go. The once familiar world had turned into a nightmare. No warm bed, no familiar hands to pet her head. Just endless white, swallowing everything in its path. Her body ached. Her paws burned from the ice, but she had to keep moving. Then, a sound shattered the silence. A long, eerie howl echoed in the distance. Wolves. Her ears perked. Her breath hitched. She wasn't alone anymore. But that didn't mean she was safe. With every ounce of strength left in her, she stumbled forward, desperate to escape. But with the storm raging around her and danger lurking in the shadows, one thing was certain. Time was running out. And the worst part? No one was coming to save her. Or so she thought. Wealth, power, influence. The millionaire had it all. Behind his grand mansion and polished reputation, however, lay a heart as cold as the winter night that swallowed the helpless German shepherd. She had once been his loyal companion, a faithful protector, and a constant source of unconditional love. She had been there when he returned from long business trips, waiting patiently by the door, her tail wagging in pure devotion. She had guarded his estate, trusted his voice, and never once questioned his intentions. But to him, she was no longer useful. She was pregnant, and that made her an inconvenience. The very life growing inside her, something that should have been cherished, was instead seen as a burden. The man who had once praised her for her obedience now saw her as nothing more than an expense, a disposable object, rather than a living, breathing soul. And so, with zero remorse, he made his decision. A drive into the wilderness. A sudden stop on an empty road. A door flung open. And in a single heartless moment, he threw her out into the freezing abyss. She didn't understand. She turned, her eyes pleading, expecting him to call her back, to tell her it was a mistake. She had been a good girl. She had done everything right. But all she saw were the glowing red taillights disappearing into the distance. She chased after them, her tired body struggling against the icy ground. She ran until her legs gave out, until her body collapsed into the snow. The man who had once held her leash, fed her, and called her his companion had left her to die. And he never looked back. The air was brutal, the kind that stole breath and turned it into ice. The world around her was nothing but white. A frozen wasteland with no warmth, no shelter, and no mercy. The wind howled like a predator circling its prey, biting through her thick fur. She tried to move, but every step was agony. Her belly, swollen with the lives inside her, made it harder to push forward. Her legs trembled beneath her, but she refused to stop. Stopping meant death. The snow stung her eyes, but she kept looking, desperate for something, anything, that could offer warmth. But there was nothing. No kind stranger to pick her up. No warm hands to hold her. No familiar voice to tell her it would be okay. The night grew darker. The wind screamed louder. The temperature plummeted. She was running out of time. And then, the distant sound of howls sent terror through her soul. She wasn't alone in the cold anymore. Something was coming. Something that could be even worse than the cold itself. The icy wind ripped through the night like a vengeful ghost, howling across the barren landscape, carrying with it a cold so deep it felt like knives piercing through skin. The German shepherd, pregnant, abandoned, and utterly alone, struggled against the merciless elements, her once powerful legs now trembling beneath the weight of exhaustion and despair. Every step forward was a battle. Her breath came in short, painful gasps, each exhale turning to mist before vanishing into the frozen void. Her paws, raw from the ice and jagged terrain, stung with every movement. The weight of her swollen belly made her movements sluggish, but she forced herself to keep going. Stopping meant death. Her body begged for rest, her muscles burned, but the bitter truth was clear. No one was coming for her. The darkness around her was vast and unforgiving. She had been thrown away like garbage, discarded by the very person she had loved most. The realization struck her harder than the cold itself. She had once been his loyal protector, his companion, and in return, she had been left to die. The cruel wind howled louder, sending a fresh wave of snow whipping against her face, stinging her eyes. She blinked furiously, desperate to see through the storm, but the world had become an endless, swirling white abyss. Still, she pressed on. For herself, for the lives growing inside her, for the chance, no matter how small, that she might survive. Then suddenly, a sound cut through the storm. Her ears perked up instantly. Something was nearby. At first she thought maybe, just maybe, a miracle had come. A kind stranger? A car stopping? Someone to save her? But the moment she turned, her heart nearly stopped. Glowing eyes, yellow, piercing, unblinking, stared at her from the darkness. Not one, not two, 5. They were watching her, tracking her, waiting. A low growl rumbled through the air, deep and menacing, barely audible over the wind. She knew that sound. Instinct told her what her heart refused to believe. She was being hunted. Wolves. A primal fear surged through her veins. Her already fragile body tensed, every instinct screaming at her to run. But where? The cold had drained her strength. Her legs wobbled beneath her. Her swollen belly made escape nearly impossible. One of the wolves took a step forward, its powerful frame cutting through the snowy mist. Its lips curled, revealing razor-sharp teeth. Its eyes, filled with hunger, locked onto her, testing her, measuring her weakness. Her breath hitched. She knew the rules of the wild. Predators preyed on the weak, the sick, the abandoned. And right now she was all three. Another growl, this time from behind her. She whipped her head around, heart pounding. More eyes appeared in the darkness. They had encircled her, trapping her. The storm raged on, but she barely felt the cold anymore. A new, far more terrifying force had taken over, pure survival instinct. Her mind raced. What could she do? She had never fought before, not like this. She had never been trained for battle, never learned to hunt. She had always been the protector, the one standing by her owner's side, not the one left to fend for herself. But now there was no one to protect her. And yet, something deep inside her refused to surrender. A spark of defiance ignited within her chest. A fire that had not been extinguished by betrayal, nor by the freezing storm. Her puppies were still inside her. They were still alive. And if she gave up now, they never stood a chance. With the last ounce of strength in her body, she bared her teeth and let out a deep, guttural snarl. It was a warning, a desperate declaration that she would not go down without a fight. The wolves hesitated. They weren't expecting that. Their prey, weak, shivering, alone, was fighting back. For a moment, the air was thick with tension. Then, a sudden noise shattered the standoff. A loud crack echoed through the night. The wolves' heads snapped toward the sound. A branch breaking? Footsteps? Something or someone was out there. And in that split second of distraction, she ran. She didn't know where she was going. She didn't know if she would make it. All she knew was that this could not be the end. Not here. Not like this. The freezing wind tore through the night as she ran. Her legs barely able to carry her, her breath coming in desperate gasps. Every muscle in her body screamed in protest, but she couldn't stop. Not now. Not with the wolves so close behind. Then, just as she thought she could run no more, her paws slipped. She tumbled forward, her body crashing into the snow, pain shooting through her exhausted limbs. This was it. This was where it would end. But just as the wolves closed in, a blinding beam of light cut through the darkness. A vehicle, headlights piercing the storm. A stranger was out there. The wolves hesitated, their hunger battling against their instinct to flee from danger. A deep voice rang out into the night, firm and commanding. "Hey, get outta here." A man's silhouette emerged from the blizzard, tall and broad-shouldered, wielding a flashlight. The wolves growled but took cautious steps back, watching, waiting. Then, as if sensing that their opportunity had passed, they vanished into the trees. She could barely believe it. She was alive, but her relief was short-lived. Her body gave out, collapsing into the snow, her chest rising and falling rapidly. She had run too far, fought too hard. Her strength was gone. The man hurried to her side. Kneeling beside her, he removed his thick coat and draped it over her trembling body. His hands were rough, calloused, but his touch was gentle. "Hey girl, you're freezing," he murmured, brushing snow from her fur. Then his eyes widened. He could see it now, her swollen belly. She wasn't just a stray. She was pregnant. The man worked quickly. Scooping her into his arms, he carried her back toward his truck, shielding her from the relentless wind. The warmth of his body pressed against hers, and for the first time in what felt like forever, she felt something unfamiliar: safety. As he placed her carefully on the passenger seat, his gaze softened. "Who would do this to you?" he muttered, shaking his head. She stared up at him, her deep brown eyes filled with exhaustion, pain, and something else. A silent plea. The engine roared to life. Heat flooded the cabin, wrapping around her like a protective embrace. She had never been in this truck before. She didn't know this man, but somehow she trusted him. He reached over, brushing a hand over her head. For the first time in days, she closed her eyes, not out of fear, but from relief. She had been thrown away like she was nothing. But now someone had found her. And maybe, just maybe, this wasn't the end. But just as she felt the warmth seep into her frozen limbs, a sharp pain tore through her belly. Her eyes flew open. A whimper escaped her throat. The man turned to her, eyes narrowing in concern. "Hey, you okay?" Another sharp pain, stronger this time. Her breathing turned erratic, her body tensing. The realization struck hard. It was happening. She was going into labor. The man cursed under his breath, gripping the wheel. "Hold on, girl. We're almost home." But she knew there was no time. The storm raged outside, the roads slick with ice. The truck was moving too slowly. Her puppies weren't going to wait. A cry of pain escaped her as another contraction hit. Her body trembled. Sweat and snow clung to her fur. She pushed against the seat, trying to fight the overwhelming agony. The man realized it too. He had to act fast. Pulling off to the side of the road, he threw the truck into park and turned to her. "All right, girl. You're gonna have to do this here." His voice was steady, but there was worry in his eyes. She whimpered, her body instinctively shifting, bracing for what was to come. And then, with one final, desperate push, the first cry filled the truck. Tiny, fragile pup. Alive. The man let out a breath he didn't realize he was holding. He quickly wrapped the newborn in a towel, placing it close to its mother. But she wasn't done yet. Another contraction. Another push. Then another. One by one, her puppies entered the world, gasping for air, their tiny bodies wriggling in the makeshift warmth of the truck. The German shepherd, exhausted beyond measure, licked each one instinctively, her heart beating wildly. She had done it. Against all odds, she had done it. The man leaned back in his seat, exhaling. He looked at her. This abandoned, forgotten dog, now a mother. And in that moment, he knew. She wasn't just some stray. She wasn't just another dog left to die. She was a fighter, a survivor, and no matter what it took, he wasn't going to leave her again. The warmth inside the truck did little to calm the storm raging in the man's mind. Something didn't add up. He had rescued plenty of strays before. Abandoned pets, neglected animals left to fend for themselves. But this dog, there was something different about her. As she curled protectively around her newborn puppies, exhausted but instinctively nurturing them, he noticed it. A strange marking on her ear. At first, he thought it was just a scar, maybe a wound from her brutal fight for survival. But when he leaned closer, parting the thick fur, his breath caught in his throat. It wasn't a scar. It was a brand. A precise, deliberate marking burned into her skin. Letters and numbers, some kind of code. His pulse quickened. He had seen something like this before. It wasn't a random tattoo, not a microchip number. This was an identification mark used by elite breeders. A sinking feeling gripped his chest. This dog wasn't just another stray. She belonged to someone. But the real question was, why had they abandoned her? With a deep breath, he pulled out his phone and quickly snapped a photo of the marking. His fingers were almost unsteady as he began searching. He had a gut feeling that this wasn't just any breeder. After a few minutes of searching databases, his worst fears were confirmed. The marking traced back to an exclusive German Shepherd breeding facility, one owned by a millionaire named Victor Langley. The name sent a chill through him. Victor Langley wasn't just rich, he was powerful, influential, and notoriously ruthless. Known for breeding and selling only the finest German Shepherds, his business was built on an uncompromising standard of perfection. And that's when it clicked. This mother dog, she wasn't perfect. Maybe she had a health issue the breeder didn't want to deal with. Maybe she wasn't strong enough to be the ideal guard dog. Or maybe it was something even worse. His gaze flickered to the tiny, fragile puppies snuggled against their mother's belly. Could it be that the father of these puppies wasn't the right bloodline? Had she been discarded because her puppies were considered worthless to a man who only valued perfection? The thought made his stomach turn. He felt a slow, burning anger rise in his chest. How could someone with so much wealth, so much power, be so heartless? Determined to find out more, he dug deeper. Victor Langley was no stranger to controversy. Over the years, there had been whispers, allegations of cruelty, breeding for profit over ethics, and rumors that unwanted dogs were disposed of rather than rehomed. But no one had ever been able to prove it. Until now, he looked down at the mother dog. She had survived against all odds. She had fought for her life and the lives of her unborn puppies. She wasn't weak. She wasn't disposable. She was a fighter. And if Langley thought he could throw her away and no one would notice, he was dead wrong. The man clenched his jaw, a new resolve hardening in his chest. He wasn't just going to save this dog and her puppies. He was going to expose the truth. Because no matter how rich or powerful Victor Langley was, he had made a grave mistake. He had left behind the one thing that could destroy him, evidence. The media frenzy was relentless. What started as a quiet act of cruelty, a powerful millionaire abandoning a pregnant German Shepherd in the freezing cold, had turned into a national scandal. Animal rights activists flooded social media with the story, and the public wasn't just angry, they were furious. How could a man worth millions leave a helpless dog to die? If he does this to an animal, what else is he capable of? News outlets picked up the story, and before long, Victor Langley's name was everywhere. His luxurious lifestyle, his multimillion-dollar breeding empire, his expensive cars, none of it mattered anymore. The only thing people saw was his cruelty. First, Langley ignored the backlash. He believed the storm would pass, just like every other scandal among the rich and powerful. But this time, he had underestimated the power of public outrage. As protests erupted outside his breeding facility, and major clients began cutting ties with his business, Langley knew he had to act. Not out of guilt, but out of desperation. So, he did what the rich always do when caught in a scandal. He tried to buy his way out. He hired a team of PR experts, issued a statement claiming he had been misrepresented by the media, and even donated money to animal shelters, a pathetic attempt to silence the outrage. Then, in a move no one saw coming, he played his final card. Langley's lawyers filed a lawsuit, demanding the German Shepherd and her puppies be returned to him. His argument: Small Blue Diamond, she was legally his property. Small Blue Diamond, the rescue was illegal. Small Blue Diamond, he had been looking for her, but someone had taken her before he could save her. The audacity of his claim shocked everyone. After abandoning her in the freezing cold, after leaving her to suffer alone, he now wanted her back? The man who had rescued the German Shepherd was livid. She was not a possession. She was not something to be discarded and reclaimed at will. The legal battle quickly became a public spectacle. Animal rights organizations rallied behind the rescuer. High-profile lawyers offered their services pro bono. Thousands of people signed petitions demanding justice. The courtroom was packed. Reporters lined up outside, waiting for the case that would determine the fate of one dog, but also expose the dark reality of the breeding industry. Langley's lawyers tried every trick in the book. Small Blue Diamond, they painted the rescuer as an opportunist who had taken the dog for attention. Small Blue Diamond, they claimed no real proof existed that Langley had abandoned her. Small Blue Diamond, they argued that the dog had been part of a selective breeding program and had accidentally been left behind. But then, the truth came crashing down. The rescuer's legal team came prepared. First, they presented veterinary reports proving the dog had been malnourished and exposed to extreme temperatures. Her condition wasn't accidental, it was intentional neglect. Then came the damning footage. The moment the dog was found, shivering in the snow, desperately trying to shield her newborns. But the final blow? An ex-employee from Langley's breeding facility stepped forward. With shaking hands, she held up a folder, documents, photographs, internal reports. And then she spoke. Small Blue Diamond dogs that didn't meet perfection were disposed of. Small Blue Diamond pregnant dogs that weren't valuable were abandoned. Small Blue Diamond Langley had been doing this for years, hiding behind wealth and intimidation. Gasps filled the courtroom. Langley's face turned ghostly pale. For the first time in his life, his money couldn't save him. It didn't take long for the verdict to come in. Langley lost everything. Small Blue Diamond, the judge ruled that he had no legal right to the dog or her puppies. Small Blue Diamond, he was charged with animal cruelty and fined heavily. Small Blue Diamond investigations into his breeding facility began immediately. And that was just the beginning. Within weeks, Small Blue Diamond luxury sponsors cut ties with him. Small Blue Diamond major clients refused to do business with him. Small Blue Diamond, his breeding empire crumbled overnight. What once had been a glittering empire of wealth and prestige was now a crumbling ruin of disgrace. Langley had spent his life chasing perfection. But in the end, his greed became his downfall. As for the German Shepherd, she never had to suffer again. She and her puppies found a loving home, one where they were cherished, protected, and given the life they deserved. She had been abandoned as worthless. But in the end, she was the one who exposed the truth, brought justice, and changed lives forever. And the world had witnessed the ultimate karma. For the first time in a long time, Luna didn't have to be afraid. The once abandoned German Shepherd, left to die in the freezing cold, was now curled up on a warm bed, her puppies nestled safely beside her. Jacob, the man who had risked everything to save her, sat beside them, gently stroking Luna's fur. Her eyes, once filled with fear and betrayal, now held trust. Luna had spent her life being used, discarded, and forgotten. But now, she was loved. Her puppies, who had been born into the harshest conditions, would never have to know the kind of suffering she endured. They had a future, a safe, happy, and loving one. And Jacob? He had gained more than just a loyal companion. Luna had changed his life too. He had always believed that one person couldn't make a difference in such a cruel world. But after witnessing Luna's resilience, her will to survive, and the way she still found the strength to love, he realized that kindness, even from one person, could change everything. And that's exactly what he had done. As Jacob watched Luna play with her puppies, a thought settled deep in his heart. A thought he knew the world needed to hear. Small blue diamond, how many animals suffer in silence? Just like Luna once did? Small blue diamond, how many lives could be changed if people chose compassion over cruelty? Small blue diamond, how different would the world be if we simply chose to care? Luna's story wasn't just about one dog. It was a reminder that even in a world filled with greed, selfishness, and cruelty, kindness still exists. That no matter how broken, abandoned, or forgotten someone feels, they are still worthy of love. And that sometimes the ones who are discarded as worthless are the ones who end up changing everything. So the question remains, what kind of person will you choose to be? Will you turn away from suffering? Or will you be the one to make a difference? Because just like Jacob, you could be someone's miracle. Luna's story is just one of many. Every day, countless animals face cruelty, abandonment, and suffering. But you have the power to make a difference. Paw prints support local animal shelters. There are thousands of animals waiting for a second chance. Even a small donation, fostering, or adoption can change a life. Paw prints raise awareness. Share the story with others. The more people know about animal neglect and cruelty, the more we can work together to stop it. Paw prints take action. If you ever see an animal in distress, don't turn away. Report it, step in, and do what you can. Sometimes one act of kindness is all it takes to save a life. Small blue diamond, if the story moved you, let us know in the comments. What would you have done in Jacob's place? Small blue diamond, hit the like button and subscribe for more powerful stories that remind us of the impact of kindness. Because in the end, the world needs more people like Jacob. And maybe that person is you.